So the front skirt and the side front pieces are seamed together with French seams, as I showed, and the bottom edge of just those 3 pieces sewn together is hemmed, and that was the first step in the directions. The second step in the directions is to go ahead and hem the bottoms of both apron pieces. So these are the 2 of the apron pieces are going to be done out of this and it's really thick, so I don't want to do a turn and turn hem on it because that's going to be a little bit more tricky when it comes to inside the seams because of how bulky that is going to be. So I went digging through my stash, and this is why I pick these things up at thrift stores every and anytime I find them. I have a whole container. You know, they're usually like 25 to 50 cents at the thrift store if you can find them. I don't even know how old this one is. You can tell it's a little bit older. But this one was open, so I don't know how much is left on there. And then I have one more in pink. I think it's the same shade. Can't really tell with the plastic on. Anyway, I'm not going to open it unless I need to. But what I'm going to do is, you know, this is a seam binding, and I'm going to sew it right sides together to the bottom of both apron pieces, and then I will flip those up, and I'm probably just going to stitch them down. But how I stitch them down is what I'm still working on, because also before I actually put these on those skirt panels, I have to come up with what I'm going to do for the trim. So I'm not too worried about the stitching because I'm pretty sure the trim will cover whatever stitching I do. So I wasn't expecting to have to make some decisions on the trim as quickly as I am, but here we are. So I'm going to go ahead and get these sewn on right sides together for both of the aprons, get them pressed up, and I might go ahead and stitch them down, and then I will start just laying out trim and seeing what I like and what I get on it. I wasn't initially prepared to start trim quite yet, so I have some decisions to make. Lots of decisions. Lovely. Okay, this first though. So I've been sitting on the skirt for a while. I was not aware that one of the first steps of this particular skirt design for the bustle gown was going to involve me coming up with a lot of my trim right off the bat. The last one I made, I was able to construct the body of the skirt for the most part. Really the only thing that I needed to figure out ahead of time was that fringe on the apron, which I already knew what I was going to do for that. So that kind of set me at a stall for a couple of weeks. I have not really picked this up. I think it's been 3 weeks at this point since I've really touched it because I wasn't sure what I wanted to do, and everything that I was doing I didn't really like. And yeah, so I think I have figured out at least what I'm going to do enough to get the aprons done and start that part of the construction. So I've cut out strips of the actual upholstery fabric and then of this pink cotton. Now this pink cotton has made a lot of appearances in the last in the last few videos because it's the lining for the bodice, and this was also the lining for the bodice and the skirt of the dress I made for Easter for me. And I still have a decent amount of it left, even after all of this. So these strips are 5 inches wide, both of them. And what I'm going to do, and I just hope it works, this is the only thing that I could come up with, is I'm going to turn this into the ruffle on the bottom of the aprons. I wasn't liking anything else, and so we're going to go with a ruffle. I also caved and used a coupon to get a little bit more of this. I already had, I think, 2 yards of it from a thrift store find, and it just wasn't enough. So this was the original. They're slightly different, But I got, I think, 3 more yards at Joann of this. I really was trying not to spend extra money, but this was really the only thing I was liking, and it just didn't have enough of it. So it uses up thrift store, and I only got a little bit more. So it's not, again, it's not an identical match, but it is pretty close enough. My husband really couldn't tell the difference. So I'll take that as a win. So I think I know how I'm gonna put this on. The reason I cut out the cotton for the ruffle is I figured that was the best way to do the hem for that. So I'm gonna sew them right sides together along the bottom edge, iron it so that this is in the back, and then run a gathering stitch along the top back where this will be on the back and this will be on the front. And then that way, that will make sure that the ruffle is hemmed and I don't have to do another hem. I'm still thinking along the bottom of the apron is where I want to put, like above the ruffle is where I want to put this. And I really like, pause. They're not straight white, they're off-white, but I really like the idea of putting these string of pearls, pearl drops on there somehow as well. Those are some ideas. For right now, I have 2 strips that I cut that are the width, so it's selvage to selvage, and then for each apron, and then for the bigger apron, which I think is on the bottom, I cut an extra additional strip that I'm going to sew on because the apron is a little bit wider, so I need a little bit more. And I'm hoping that it's not too thick and it doesn't look weird. There's a chance I'm going to do all of this and then I'm going to not like it. We're going to go with it. And the most that I can come back with is that I hate it and I take off the ruffle and go back to square one. But we're going to give it a shot. So to do the ruffle, I ran the gathering stitches, 2 rows of them across the top of the ruffle once I had finished the construction of it that I talked about. And then I brought this pearl trim over and pinned and then basted it down, and then took that over to the bottom of each apron and then just utilized the fact that I had already ironed up the bottom edge of the aprons, pinned it straight on top, and then sewed that down, and then brought the other trim, the white trim that I put on top of that, and sewed it down on top of it. So that white trim covered over all of these rows of stitching, and I think it turned out great. I'm very, very pleased with this. And then to cover over all of the raw edges in the back so that it won't fray, I made my own bias tape out of or I guess just binding because it really wasn't cut on the bias, out of the pink cotton I've been using for lining, and then hand whip stitched that down on both edges of it to cover over all of the raw edges at the back of the skirt aprons, which kind of made the fact that I used that seam binding earlier unnecessary, but whatever. Okay, I finished the trim on the bottom of the aprons and I'm happy with it. I'm really, really glad because I was hitting a wall for a little bit, but let me try to get it turned around. There we go. I really like that. So I ended up having to take out the pins that I had put in to mark the horizontal pleats because they kept falling out all over the sewing room while I was doing this trim part. So I'm going to go with the pattern pieces back and remark the pleats and then start pleating them onto the front panel of the skirt. I started this a couple of weeks ago, so it's pretty exciting to get to this because the skirt isn't supposed to be the challenging part of this until it's the decorating part. So anyway, I'm excited to finally have that done, and I think the ruffles turned out great, and I don't think that they're too hefty. The cotton I used for the back is pretty light, so it worked really well for giving me that clean hem without having a stitch line there. and I was able to cover up that stitch line, and I love the pearls. I think it's a nice touch. So let's get to marking and pleating. Alright, so I have sewed down the pleats on both sides for the horizontal pleats for the top and the bottom apron. That's a lot of fabric in those seams. I'm going to go ahead and just serge these edges, and it'll be serged inside, and I don't care, and that's fine, because that's going to be, and I'm going to do it separately because I will want that one done separately as well, because I'm pretty sure there's going to be some more trim on that side of the fabric, in whether it's in this seam or the other side of that seam. And yeah, that's what I'm going to do. So I got to take it over to the serger now and serge down the sides, but we have them basted. Alright, I don't remember where I was, what I last said, what I last recorded, so I'm just going to say this and cut what I need to. But this is one strip of what I'm planning on doing. So this one I sewed the sides together. Actually, you know what, this one's left over from the ruffle from earlier, so I just pulled out the gathering stitches on the top edge and then sewed the other side down and then turned it into a tube. And my plan is I'm going to ruche this up. So I really like ruched trim. I think it looks really pretty. And I just, playing around with stuff, I think that that's what I want to do. So I'm going to do, what I'm thinking is so this is one of the side panels, 2 long rows of ruched trimming that start basically around the same area on the top and then spread out and come to the bottom, and then one across the bottom, like, you know, this. So I have 2 of these side panels, obviously. So I've got 2 of these strips that are this length that are going to be the ones that go across the bottom. And then I have 4 long strips that I need to do all the sewing together that are equal length with their lining, and then that is what I will ruche up in going down the long way. So that is the next step. It's going to be a process, and it might be a few days before I get to it. I only had long enough to jump in here and film this little bit because I was requested to chaperone for my twins' last field trip today to a state park, and they're really excited, and I mean, it's going to be fun, but I'm going to be with 2 classes of kindergartners all day long, so I'll be exhausted when I get home, but I cannot tell you how excited I am that this is the last kindergarten trip ever. I'm so excited. I'm so excited. I am not trying to rush my children to grow up, but I am very done with kindergarten. Our twins were a surprise. For those that haven't been around here long enough for me to have said that, that's a whole nother story that I don't even know if people on this channel want to hear. Let's just say I didn't think I would be this far into my parenting journey and still not be done with kindergarten classes. So I'm very excited. And yes, so that is what I'm doing today, hence why I will not be sewing. But I will get back to this. I cut out the side back pieces and went ahead and got them sewn on. So as I stated, I serged the inside of the front bit where all of this came together, and then I serged the other seam, even though I didn't end up putting any trim on this piece before it went into the seam. I played around with it for a little while before I made that decision, but the trim that I'm going to do I think will work just fine on top without me having to do it before I went ahead and sewed the pieces together. This is at a stop point for the moment. I'm going to throw that over the chair there. And I went ahead and did all of the seams and ironing for all of these panels that I'm going to ruche up. So I've got the 4 really long ones and then the 2 shorter ones. Now, I haven't yet figured out how I'm going to do the gathering on this because this is pretty thick, and no matter what I was doing with the ruffles, trying to pull a gathering stitch through here when I ran it through with the machine was very challenging. But for now, I'm going to put this aside, and that is a future Erica problem. I'll get to that another time. The next thing that I figured out I really messed up, and there was no way to go back and undo it and redo it, so I just had to fix it, is the center back skirt panel was supposed to be cut on the fold, and I missed that little detail and cut it. So I did a French seam about as tiny as I could manage to not lose, as little of that volume as possible. It's not, as far as that is concerned, I don't think that that's really that big of a deal. It's just a big poofy back, and I think I lost a ½ inch on both sides. But anyway, still is there. There's nothing I can do about it. I don't have any more of this fabric to go back and recut it on the fold. So it is what it is. And I hemmed the bottom of the back and hemmed the side back pieces. So the train, which is going to go up under this piece, I've got to sew those train pieces together and then hem those. But I will get to that in a minute. The back, the top back. So it said for an extra poofy to put stabilizer on the back of it where it's going to be pleated up and to flatline that together. So I have cut out, I have some pretty nicely stiff stabilized, and it is cut to where it needs to go. So I've got it marked where I do need to do the pleats here, and it's cut and flatlined all along the top and the sides. Obviously not on the bottom because I don't want a seam going across the middle of the fabric. So the next thing here is to get this back, the horizontal pleats on the back done. So that's where I am. So I'm going to get to pleating, and I'm going to base that down and then tackle the hemming and the sewing together of the train. And then I think at that point when we just start assembling it all together to actually like get the skirt put together, and then I can worry about, then I'll be worrying about how I'm going to ruche that up. So one step at a time, we're getting there. And for putting the train on the bottom of the back of the skirt, I just ran again 2 rows of gathering stitches and sewed it down, and it just took a while to make sure that all of the gathers were spaced out evenly, but I think it turned out really good and I'm really happy with it. I have sewn I showed gathering it and pinning it to the back, but the train is on, so it was sewn with the right side of the train to the wrong side of the back, and I'm going to put some trim over that so you won't see that. And then that was stitched down, and then a row of, well, I made binding. It said twill tape, but I had some of this pink that I've been using for the other parts of the project, so I used it here as well, and covered over all of those raw edges from the gathers, and at the same time formed a casing for this drawstring, which will be used to cinch up the back skirt to the shape that it's supposed to be. And then I have already heavily tacked that string into the edge. I'm going to go trim it off, But the next step is to sew the back to the rest of the skirt. So I am going to do these in French seams. So this is going to just take me a while, and I'm not going to film it because it's just the bulkiness of the back of the skirt plus the bulkiness of the front. I'll just show it when it's done because I'm not sure. I'm already like going to be managing a whole bunch of fabric here. The other thing I did go ahead and do is I ran 2 rows of gathering stitches along the back of the top of the back edge. The instructions gave the options for pleating or gathering for both the train and this part, and I'm gonna opt for gathering on this one. Hopefully it'll work okay. I did end up having to take off the original stabilizer that I used for the back, and I put fusible interfacing on instead because that's the only other option I had. The other one was far too stiff and I wasn't going to be able to do anything with it. So I hope that it'll gather up okay with the interfacing on the back. I still went ahead and basted it, flatlined it down to the back, even though it's also fusible, because, you know, I want to make sure that it stays. So fusible wasn't my top pick, but again, I'm working with what I have, so I think it'll work fine as far as like adding the poofiness that it needs to. So I'm going to go get the French seams done for the 2 side panels, and on one of the sides I'm going to leave about an 8 to 9 inch gap, which that's where I'm going to form the placket for the closure on the side of the skirt. So I'll show that when it's done, but I feel like not only am I working with a whole bunch of bulk in the skirt, but it would be pretty boring to just watch the sewing machine do 4 long straight lines that I'm just going to be trimming and ironing in between. So I will check back after that is done, but I'm pretty excited because this is actually the assembly of the skirt, and I've just been working with like these weird things, and you know, once I get that done and get the waistband on, I'll be able to actually like put it up over on my dress form and see it in the shape of a skirt. So I'm really excited about that because then I can actually like start to see the visuals come together and work on the trim. So let's get to French seaming. So I did do the French seam for the right hand side of the skirt that the opening placket is not in, but I was really struggling with it over the pleats, the horizontal pleats and all of that. So for the other side where the opening is, I serged both edges separately and sewed them together that way and pressed it to one side, and that worked so much better for this side, especially given the fact that I needed to leave the opening placket. So I have gone ahead and sewed the waistband on with its first seam, which required, you know, pinning it all the way around the front and then gathering up the back area that has the interfacing on it to fit in the leftovers. So that's a pretty tight gather right there, but it did work. And now I have folded over the waistband here to where, I hope I can show it. So both edges are folded up. Here's the side that's sewn down on this side and then this side, and I'm gonna do a straight stitch there on both sides of the waistband, and then I'll be able to flip it, encasing all of the raw edges, and then I will sew that down. I don't know yet how I'm gonna sew it down, but I'm gonna go ahead and go do this stitching, clip it, and then do the pressing and pinning and getting it turned over, and then I will figure out how I want to sew it. Alright, I have the waistband on, and I decided to go ahead and just machine stitch it down. This is going to be up under the bodice, so it won't be visible, so it doesn't matter. I have put on the skirt hook. I'm debating on putting 2 there. but I have not sewn on the bar yet because I need to go put everything on and try it on and make sure that it's right and make sure I put the bar in the correct location. So once I have that tried on, I can get the bar sewn on, figure out whether I want a second hook and bar, whether or not it needs it for support, and yeah, that completes the basic construction of the skirt. So I will report back about that, and decorating will be next. A few points of note. So the base, its base is done. You can see it's not laying correctly there. I know what I need to do. So the upholstery fabric is a lot heavier than this fabric here. So it's dragging it down here. So what I need to do is I need to get these pleats correctly and like tack them so that this doesn't, so that this can hold it shape where it's supposed to be better, and particularly down here on the bottom. And then that will help hold this closer to where it's supposed to be, straight up and down here at this seam. Now the trim that I'm planning on putting on the skirt, I think will also help with that and help it hold its structure back there better. But I've got the, like, all unfinished edges are done, and that's what I needed to get done for this video, because I'm going to go ahead and put this one up, and then we'll do the decorations on another video. Trying to get a good, I don't have much extra room in this room, but that's a basic of the train and the poof in the back, and that's where the back overlaps the train there. So obviously, you know, I have no decoration, no further trimmings on this than what I originally put on the front aprons. So I got a lot of work left to do, but I really love it. I tried it on, and per the usual, this is still, I think, one of my favorite silhouettes on myself. But it's looking like I had envisioned already, so I can't wait to deck it out. But I needed to get this part done because it was fraying so badly. Excuse the dust, because I've got to clean the floor. But I don't know if you can see all of these little bits and pieces literally everywhere. It goes all the way back in front of my iron, all the way behind the trash can. That's all fraying from the fabric. So yeah, I needed to get that part done. And yeah, so I hope that you have enjoyed this so far. I hope that you subscribe so that you can see to the end of this project. I'm really excited. I still also want to make a hat for it, and so I would love for you to join me for the rest of this fun costume. I will see you in the next one.